Welcome back, everyone, to BG5 Live. This is episode 20. So you'll know that we took a little break, Vanessa and I, but we're back with a new shift. So we're changing up our kind of flow through the program. We are not going to be looking at the transits anymore. That makes you sad. We totally understand. But we're moving into Penta skills. So we'll be talking about that. So Vanessa, before we jump in, how you doing? Anything you want to share with us?
I'm good. Lots of exciting things to share, but what we will actually say is welcome to BG5 Live, the show for BG5 and human design professionals, students, and enthusiasts who want a deeper understanding on how to apply human design to business so they can thrive in their own careers and help their clients in doing the same. And I'm super excited that we are doing this focus now on the Penta skills to help people understand better, like how we bring this into group work and why BG5 is so impactful and how you can really help your clients with this.
Yeah, this is going to be really interesting. So we'll get into it in just a few minutes. So we are welcoming back Veronica Chase, which is really exciting. Veronica, I don't remember the episode we had Veronica on, but Veronica, some big news for her. She recently graduated and then has made the transition to becoming a teacher. So she just started her foundations class yesterday, a couple days ago.
Saturday.
Saturday, yes.
Yeah.
So Veronica, welcome back. So quick
Thank
question
you.
for you. We're very excited to have you on board for today. And I'm dying to know, how has the transition been from graduating, doing all your studies, into becoming a teacher? How's that been for you?
Well, I mean, I think it's been really interesting. I've been studying since 2020 and, most recently completed my instructor certification. And, I think maybe it wouldn't be surprising for me to say that, it really feels like it's come full circle. So all this studying that I've been doing and learning about different people's designs, all the people that I have coached using BG5, has really just ultimately informed, really my experience every step of the way. I would say, one of the most important things that I've learned over these last 6 years, I mean, I'm in my 6th year of my experiment, but, what I have learned is that, we are not any one singular component of our design. We are all of it. So this expression that you're seeing here of me, I, of course, am embodying this in a very unique way that is totally mine. So someone else could have similar traits or even strengths, and other qualities that, are similar to my design, but the way they express it is going to look different. So I would say that, I don't make presumptions. Like, I look at each person's design with fresh eyes and kind of take that into it. So now stepping into the foundations course and getting to meet people from all over the world who are just starting their journey is nothing short of absolutely exciting for me, because again, it was not that long ago that I can't remember how it felt for me when I first learned about BG5. And so it's fun that now I'm going to be their guide at the beginning of their journey. And I mean, it's a big responsibility, and I'm excited to do it. You're Mike, you're muted.
Sorry about that. So this is really fascinating for me in the sense that, you mentioned this idea of completing the circle. You also have this really extensive background coaching, like you mentioned, facilitating. I'm guessing teaching has been thrown in there too. But I also think, and let me know what your thoughts around this is, and I studied the martial arts for 20 years. And so I had a lot of teachers during that time. And I began to understand that certain teachers were really good with certain sort of like belts. So the white belt is the very beginner, the black belt is sort of the peak of that sort of progression. Do you feel like, having just come through your training, that you can meet the new students better where they are because of your recent history of just being there just a couple of years ago?
Yeah. I mean, Perhaps, right? Because it wasn't that long ago, and I can remember it all very clearly, and I can see my progression over these last several years of, the way in which I pursued my studies. And then, the work that I've done with clients has really expanded. So, starting out with just a simple 90-minute overview, progressing to the three set session where I go deeper into their design. Now, people will sign up with me. I'll do 12 or more coaching sessions with a person. So I can go really deep with people to help them transition into, new aspects of their work and career and their lives. And I would have never thought about that, back when I first started. So it's interesting to see the evolution of all of it. But yeah, perhaps, like it's a little bit more recent for me. So, but it's really cool too, to just kind of revisit all of the basics and take everybody back through that.
Yeah, it's an amazing process as you become a teacher, and it's almost like you go through a relearning process, but then you get to take it deeper and deeper and deeper. My
Yeah.
my progression, I started human design 20 years ago, and I'm shocked at how much I'm learning since I come back to the institutes this time around, and it's amazing.
Yeah.
And speaking of teachers, we're secretly hoping that we can enlist Vanessa into the teaching cadre somewhere, somehow. We're going to sort of pull her into the fold.
I could see that happening. I really could.
Yeah, it's amazing at it. Now, should we jump into the Penta skills?
Yes,
First?
let's do it.
Vanessa, I'm going to put you on the spot, and if you get a little tongue-tied, just give a little sign. So you just finished your semester 3, which means that you went really deep into Penta analysis, and you did a project with a client group. How do you describe the Penta to people who don't have any understanding of what it is?
Yes. Could my sign be?
Yes.
Can I leave it to the professional teachers to describe it? Does it have to be me?
No, it doesn't have to be you. All right, so
It's,
I'll start
I
off.
mean, I'll just give like a brief overview is that, we each have our own individual electromagnetic frequency, sometimes referred to as aura. And when you come into relationship with other people, that changes. And so when you have two people, that aura, you each have your individual, it overlaps, you create a new aura. And when you have a group of 3 to 5 people, that also creates a unique electromagnetic frequency. And that particular, like in a penta, in a group, is very focused on a very specific area of the chart. And it really pulls out and highlights those skills or strengths that each of the individuals might have defined in their own chart to really contribute to bringing success to the penta or to that small group. So that would be my little short version of it.
Mike, you're
Oh,
muted.
you're still muted, or muted again.
You're saying great stuff and we're not hearing it.
And you're still saying great stuff, but we are still not hearing it.
Oh, I keep trying to do that. All right, sorry about that. So let me try to ground this into where this idea, this concept of Penta, and to build on what Vanessa and Veronica are talking about. So if you look at the body graph chart, you'll see this central column of all the functions stacked on top of one another. So you got the very bottom, you got the drive stamina, and then if you come up to energy resource, that yellow diamond in the middle is the identity, and then we got communication. So those 3 right in the middle of the body graph chart. So you got energy resource or the sacral, identity or the G, throat, communication. Those 6 strengths or channels and those 12 different gates or traits, that forms what's called the Penta zone. So that's the area, if you have any of those strengths or a lot of traits in that area, you are someone who's more designed to work in small groups. So you can use that as a little bit of a cheat sheet. So there's 6 different zones that we're going to be looking at. We're going to start with the lower left. That's the 515. Again, if you're just visualizing it in your mind, it's from the energy resource to the identity function, all the way on the left. So we're going to be looking at just this one area. Now, we're not going to totally geek out on like what each of these areas are, but we want to just give you the experience and just highlight what this is all about. So the
And
515.
I
Go
just
ahead.
want to say in the event that you do really want to geek out onto what all of these areas are, you definitely want to check out BG5, check out foundations, check out the course, because that's where you really, really get to geek out on all of this.
Yeah. Yeah. Veronica, would you like to share? You can check this out, this slide here. Anything you want to add about? So we talk about, instead of traits or gaits when we're talking about the Penta, we talk about it in terms of skills. So Veronica, how would you describe that?
Well, for me with the 515, it's, I'm kind of setting the pace of the group is the way I think of it. It's sort of, I think, broadly referred to, as almost like a cultural influence. And I have to say, I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense to me. And the way that I've experienced it when I am working specifically, in a Penta, there is just something about, I don't know, like the flow and the pace that I'm setting that seems to get synced up, right, with my flow. And one thing I have noticed, if I encounter someone else, and I may not know if they actually have the 515, but the way it can feel to me is like I will almost start butting heads with someone who's getting in the way of my flow or trying to like take over the flow of the group. And it's not like I'm doing anything, by the way, of like, I'm in charge here. I am in control of the flow. I don't say anything. It's definitely like, in a sense, unspoken. It's just the energy that I seem to be bringing to the group, the way, my aura shows up in the group, and I am somehow directing the flow of what we're going to do. So are we moving real fast? Are we being creative? Do we got to really think things through? Whatever the vibe needs to be, the tone gets set, and then that's how we proceed.
It's interesting. What I
For
just
our
realized.
audience that is not watching, I think it's important that we read the slide as well. So
Oh, sure. Yeah. Do
yeah,
you want to do that? Do you want to do that, Vanessa? Or do you want me to?
I want you to do it.
Okay. All right. So skills in the Penta. These are innate skills that others recognize in you, and you carry the frequency of these skills in your aura. Sometimes you may not recognize consciously that you possess these skills, especially if they are unconscious. And just because you have a skill, it doesn't necessarily mean you enjoy utilizing that skill or that you're even good at it. But these skills are areas that are easy for you to learn and develop. So when you're in a small group, these are only aspects of your design that are recognized, and you have this skill regardless of if you work in a small group or not, right? So it's just always present in you.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you. And I also want to point out that the skills, these are basically the traits or the gates. They are not an entire channel. The channels are strengths, and I'm sure I haven't seen the slides for today, but I'm sure we'll be getting to that. But yeah, recognizing what you have in this area is definitely what people are going to recognize in you when you are in small groups.
Yeah. So here's what we're sort of building this brick by brick. So because we're just starting with the skills and looking at the Penta. So this is a new area for us to talk about. So we think in terms of 2 zones. So we have the lower zone. So from left to right, we have the 515. Again, this is from the energy resource to the identity. So we have the 515 on the left. In the middle is the 214. And on the right side is the 2946. So that's the lower zone. So this is really specific in the sense that each particular, in terms of like Vanessa just said, each of these skills or traits, they form a strength. But when it's in the penta, when it's in a group or a group energy field, it turns into something else. So that's what we're going to be exploring. So this idea that each of these zones has its own frequency, that works in a very different way than when we look at just a body graph chart. So we're starting from the left, and we're looking at the 15 and the 5. So when we think about this, it has some similarities to the traits in someone's individual design, but it morphs into something new. So the 15 is something very magnetic. It pulls people into the group. Now the 5 is very different in the sense that it represents the inner life of the group. This is where we form culture. So we have reliability and culture. Now we won't look at the other ones, but now remember, also there is some similarities between the circuitries. So this is in the logic circuitry, or it's very future-oriented thinking. So this is where the patterns, this is where the systems, this is where sort of things come together in this really ordered way. Last thing I'll say about this, on the lower part, you have definition in the lower part of the penta. You are someone who would benefit from being more managed, more guided. It's like you have this energy that you bring to the table, you contribute to the group, but having outside guidance can help you use your energy in a really powerful way. So we're talking about the different, now we're going to be looking at just the different skills. Again, we're translating that from skills to traits. So this flips, the energy flips in the sense that when you're by yourself or working interpersonally with other people, then you can think of it in terms of the personal quality. This is your particular unique qualities that make you up. When you step into the aura of a group, then it becomes something transpersonal. So the way to describe this is an individual activation within the penta represents a personal trait within someone's design. So you can think of this as this kind of moving energy. When the individual enters a group, it morphs into a skill that can be utilized by the whole group. We call this the transpersonal aura. So we have our own unique energy fields, but when we step into a group, that energy morphs into its own group aura. And we can actually map that. So for example, if we have the skill of reliability, when you're in the group, everyone becomes more reliable. You don't necessarily have to do anything. You bring this quality of reliability to the team. So Vanessa and I have the 5. Why we're so excited to have Veronica on, she has both the 5 and the 15. So we get to sort of have this point counterpoint. So Vanessa, could you share this slide with us?
Sure. So your business skills, your innate abilities that you are recognized for. So pulling the team together, reliability, which is trait or gate 15, this is the ability to pull the group together into a cohesive and reliable team. The team is more stable and reliable with you around. And so remember, this is when you're in a group, it turns into a skill versus just a trait or a gate. And then culture, 5, this is the ability to establish the inner life of the office team through the dress code, meeting timing, etc. It's the way we do things around here. And I'll give a fun little example from yesterday. So I do have this, and I am assisting Mike in the cycles class right now. And Mike also has it. But I think myself, I'm really good with time and timing, and I definitely had to rein him in a little bit on making sure that we end on time. So that is part of how I address the culture of that class. Is like, Mike, we got to do this so that we can start and finish on time. And Mike honored that. So just an example from our little dynamic.
And she's being a little nice. She browbeat me into making me end on time. I saw those fierce eyes looking at me as the clock was getting closer and closer. I was getting a little more nervous as we went, we getting closer to
Well,
the time.
technically, I asked you if you would be open to hear my feedback. This is me cheating my 1762 opinions into your life by asking if you're open to hear it. But then I gave it to you and then you worked on it. So
You were very nice about that. You were very nice. You did all the
thank you.
right things. And if I step out of line, I get a little afraid. Okay. So Veronica, you have the 15. You don't have to necessarily read this chart here, this slide, but can you give us, I know you have both, and so it works as a whole strength for you. It's a whole thing, but how would you describe, just on a personal level, like do you notice your 15 in action? Now, again, we're not talking about the skill just yet. We're just talking about this as its own individual trait.
Yeah. It's interesting because I remember when I first came across this, right, when I was first starting my studies. And it was, I feel like it was difficult for me to like separate out, well, what is the 5 for me? What is the 15? Like, how do I see this show up? And like you said, it's probably just because, well, it is a strength in me. So it kind of comes together. But the thing that comes to mind when I read this, and I think where I really see this come to life is that um, the way I would say it is, I just like people. I like people. I like working with people. I like talking to people. I like doing stuff with people. And it might sound funny, to sort of say it that way, but that's the way I kind of translate this, right? Because I have the patience, right, to coach, to facilitate, to teach. And it does take patience, right? Because I'm at one step, you're at another, and I am trying to lead you down this path to get somewhere else. And, the whole thing of it's not like everybody is a clone of each other in any kind of setting like that. Everybody is their own unique individual self. So this whole way of like how I end up, I think even just over the course of my life, meeting up with so many different kinds of people, I just always felt that that's what was so interesting. I always liked the diversity of that in that sense, which is how the trait is described. I just always thought of it as, again, I like having different experiences and meeting different people, and I'm always attracted to that. I'm always drawn in to that aspect of things.
That's a really good description. That's a good sharing.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
I have a really good friend who has the 15. And so it's always been interesting when we hang out together, we find this unique flow that it's very synchronistic and it's very much in the moment. It's very much in the moment. And I really love that. And it can change on a moment's notice too, which I love as well.
I do
So
notice that too, right? That whole in the moment thing. I mean,
yeah,
it's part of my overall definition with gut response, but I do think that 515, that whole vibe of that 515 is very much about what am I feeling in the moment? What am I noticing in the moment?
yeah. So we talk about the 15 in terms of the Penta, it moves from diversity to this concept of reliability. So it's the ability to pull the group together. So you were sharing a story earlier. I don't know if you want to share it again, which is you notice that when you walk into a room, you can notice a shift in the field around you, the people around you. Would you like to share that? Just like what do you notice happens? Maybe not all the time, but at least some of the time.
Yeah, I think what I noticed, what I was describing to Mike and Vanessa when I first signed on was that sometimes what could be happening is, let's say I'm coming in, to a classroom because I'm getting ready to facilitate something, with, in the business environment that I work in. And, maybe people are just there ahead of me and they're just sort of chatting and I enter the room. What happens pretty consistently is that I notice that everybody just sort of stops doing what they're doing and suddenly their attention is on me. oh, hi, Veronica, what's gonna, oh, we just got here. Like they'll start telling me like, we got here early, or we were waiting for you, or how can we help you, or what can we do? And usually I end up giving people jobs. Oh, okay, great, you're here. Can you do this? Can you do this? Can you do this? And everybody is always willing to just jump right in, right? I think it's again, like this combination thing where I'm setting the tone, but even that whole reliability description, the way it's listed here, wow, I mean, I would say that's probably one of the biggest adjectives that someone would use to describe me, is that I'm so reliable, like seriously reliable. If we agree to do something, or I've committed to do something with you, I'm not just going to deliver. I'm going to take it up here. I'm going to take it to a whole other level, so I'm like super reliable. I can't be anything less, like I feel a huge commitment to be reliable. It's not that I have to say, it's not that I'm striving. It's not that I'm trying. It just is. It's just how I've always been.
That makes so much sense. Yeah, and I get the sense too that people with having you in the group are also more reliable too, because that's part of the magnetism.
Yeah.
Thanks. That's a great share. Vanessa, what do you notice? You and I don't have the 15, but I know that you're really attuned to the gaits and traits that you don't have. What do you notice in people who have the 15 in your life or your work?
Well, one thing with the 15, and especially the 515, so it is a generative strength, meaning anybody that has a 515 is going to be either a builder, a generator, or an express builder and manifesting generator. And we naturally have this open magnetic kind of electromagnetic frequency or aura that draws people in. And the 15 especially, but I've also read the 5 makes that frequency even bigger. So it makes so much sense to me that anybody with the 15 or the 515 would really draw people in. And I noticed this. I have multiple friends that are not in necessarily human design or BG5 space that have the 515. And it is so obvious to me that they have this effect on others as well that Veronica was just talking about. And for me, not having the 15, it's interesting because with the 5, I am very rhythmic. I am very attached to like time. I'm going to have other aspects in my design that are about that. I have very specific habits and patterns. I go to bed at the same time. I wake up at the same time. I do my morning routine in a very specific way. Like it changes over time. And so the 15 is so foreign to me in the sense that the 15 is much more about like flow and extremes of these rhythms and patterns. And so it's always like people that have the whole strength, I'm always like, how do you do, like, just, it's in my mental little mind. It's so hard for me to reconcile that because I am such a rhythmic person with the 5 in my design.
It's so funny to hear you describe it that way, because that is what it feels like though, right? Because I'm also have a lot of patterns and rhythms, right, of the way that I do things. And if something doesn't work for me anymore, I go on to a new pattern and rhythm, right? I'll willingly set up something else. And that's where I think maybe that diversity part of it kind of comes in, that willingness to be like, okay, there's my patterns and rhythms, and then there's like the groups, and that whole diversity thing comes in. I guess what I'm almost trying to describe is like the way it can feel very personal and specific to me, but then also like bigger and, encompassing like all these others that I might be interacting with at any given time. And how we're able to kind of sync up in a new way. It like creates like a different kind of pattern and rhythm in sort of like an openness. I don't know if I'm describing it well. Like I see the pattern in my mind of like what that feels like, but it is hard to sometimes articulate the way our strength like exactly comes up, and this being a skill in a penta to really be able to, articulate it.
Yeah, I mean, I find it so fascinating because I can clearly understand the 5, obviously. I can clearly understand the 15 and how different it is. And I have had close relationships with people that just have had the 15, and it can be a little bit challenging as an electromagnetic. I'm sure we'll talk about that at some point down the road in BG5 Live. Because they're like, I like to stay in my fixed patterns. They like to stay in their extreme patterns and not be pulled into fixed patterns, and how that can be problematic. It's especially fun when you're traveling with somebody. But you know, like bringing it into that whole entire strength it's I can imagine that it's hard, like you can feel it and it's hard to describe because I always find I'm like, how does that work? But it's just fascinating because I know the big aura and drawing people in part like that I can really experience and see.
Yeah.
So making the switch, so we've been sort of moving towards that. So we're moving down from the 15 to the 5. So the 5 comes up out of the energy resource. In just the regular body graph chart, we call it fixed patterns. We also routines, habits, anything that you like to do all the time, that comes out of the 5. But when we talk about it in terms of the group, the Penta, the transpersonal aura, the energy field of the group, we talk in terms of culture. So in a personal level, trait 5, fixed patterns, is you're someone who not only do you enjoy these rhythms, these routines, these habits, they become a necessary aspect of your life. In fact, if you don't follow these habits and routines, you can feel unhealthy or become unhealthy. So these patterns, these routines are what sort of stabilizes your life. They make you feel good. They contribute to your health. You can recognize them because they're the things that you want to do very naturally every day. So fun story for me is I never picked up the coffee habit. I have never once in my life drunk coffee.
Wow.
I have just, for whatever reason, I have a story that I won't share. Very early on, I kind of get really grossed out about coffee. And I said, no. And so when I hit college, I realized I needed to switch up. I needed to do something that helped me feel healthy. Because, you know, coffee habits can be addicting. Everyone around you is doing that. So I needed something else. So what I turned to was smoothies. You start off with the most basic smoothie, you throw a bunch of fruit in the blender, and then over the course of 30 years, that smoothie recipe changes over time. So, but almost, not completely, but almost every single day over the past 30 plus years, I've had a smoothie. So
Wow.
that's one of my little habits. But as what habits do you have?
Oh, it's funny that you tell this story because I didn't start coffee until I was in college, but I also have the smoothie. I drink a smoothie every day and I also drink coffee every day. So
You
I
do
have both of
both.
those. And I also have this ridiculously long morning routine that is like it's like hours long. And I have to do it. It really helps me like ground and center. And there are certain aspects that I'll skip if necessary, but like meditation for one, I have not gone a day without meditation in years. And I will not. I just will not. It's like my number one priority. If I only do one thing a day, like, and I do nothing else, it's going to be meditation because it literally keeps me sane and healthy. And that's one of my many habits. And I have thousands more. I'm not even going to bother you guys with them because we'll be here all day.
What about wake up times? Do you each have like a set wake up time or
Yep.
does it change?
I like to lie down by 9-ish, 9:30 at the latest, and I wake up between 5:30 and 6, like every day, even on weekends. And if I stay out late, I pay for it because I still wake up early. And then I have to make up that sleep because that's another thing I'm very like fixed about is my sleep routines. Like I like to make sure I get 8 to 9 hours every night. And if I need to make up a few hours, I will.
Good for you. Good for you. What about you, Veronica? You have a set time or does it shift?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about this sort of overall. I mean, I know we're speaking about the 5 specifically, but here again, I wonder if this is where like 515 is quite a dichotomy, right? The 15 likes fixed patterns, and I definitely have my patterns, but like, okay, the clock's just changed. I'll give you this as an example. So now it's dark again in the morning, Mike and Vanessa, I don't want to get out of bed. So I won't, like, I'll just keep laying there, just hoping and praying that soon it's going to be light again and I can feel human again, So what I notice about myself is while I love and do have routine and patterns, I also change it up. Like I literally cannot eat the same thing every day. really, really dislike that. And it's kind of a pain. It would be much more convenient if I just would have the same thing every day, but no, I got to see what I'm feeling like today. And then that eats up my time. And I hate that, right? Because I want the efficiency of things. So I try to kind of find other efficiencies and sort of lean on patterns in that way. But I don't know, this body just does not want to drink a smoothie every day for 30 years. Mike, that is like inconceivable to me. Like I just could not imagine. I'll go through a pattern. You know, as it gets warmer, I will drink smoothies. But somewhere as we hit September and it starts getting cold, I don't want smoothies anymore. You know, I want
Makes
something
sense.
warm.
Yeah, that
So
makes
I
sense.
will say for me, I live in the tropics, so it's always warm and we don't change time. So that also doesn't throw me
Oh,
off. But it definitely, when I lived in a more temperate climate, I also
yeah.
didn't drink smoothies year round, but I would very much like, I'll get into something and I'm like, I can eat this every day for 3 months and then I switch to something else. I will say that's also in my variables. That's a whole other story, but that we won't get into. But
Yeah.
I do think it also like fits in with the five.
Maybe I need to move to where you are and
I
have
know,
a
right?
Yeah, no,
completely
time change
different
is great. I mean, I had to adapt because now I'm on the same time as Eastern time since the US
Oh,
changed time, and usually either an hour ahead or on the same time. So I had to adapt today because I'm used to BG5 Live being at 1 p.m. for me, and now we're back to 12.
oh.
Yeah, yeah. So as we begin to finish up our exploration of the 515, and we're talking now in terms of the skill of the five is culture. Now, this one really fascinates me. I've been really thinking a lot about culture. So let me give you just some brief highlights and we can talk about it with all three of us. So this is the ability to establish the inner life of the office or team through the dress code and timings of meetings. So we're talking just in terms of business, but there's more to it. But the really simple way, and this is similar to, there's an author in the United States, his name's Seth Godin. He writes a lot about business and marketing, and he talks to them in terms of culture, and he boiled it down to one sentence, which is, this is the way we do things around here. This is the way we dress. This is the way we talk. This is the way we operate, have meetings, all of that. And so if you have the five, you have the capacity to create the culture of the group. Or if you're not creating it, you just having you in the group makes it easier for the group to have its own unique culture. So having, for myself, having been in a lot of leadership positions over the years, whether it's teaching, whether it's being a team leads, whether it's, you know, being part of like bigger teams where like I have a segment of the group that I am leading, I always notice that without trying, a culture begins to form in the groups that I lead, or even the groups I teach. And so it's just a way of doing things that the group kind of, I don't know if it expects it, but I get a sense that the culture that begins to form is a grounding factor. And so this idea of culture is really something interesting. And I've also thought about it in terms of every group, every state, every country, every business, they all have their own unique cultures. And the culture is such a powerful unifying force, sometimes for good and sometimes for bad. So Vanessa, what do you, for you, again, you just have the five, and I know that you've done a lot of work with individuals and groups. What do you notice about your ability to form culture?
That definitely, I mean, I have been in group leadership positions and I managed a Pilates studio for a long time where just naturally, I mean, in a way it was part of my job, but it was also like very much around making sure everything was set up and taken down the way it was supposed to be, that we stick to timing, because we all know how important time is to me, but that was always a big thing that came up. And even like the type of music, and you know, it was interesting, said the way that we speak, that the instructors used music that wouldn't be offensive to other people. And especially we had spin classes and stuff like that, like not using anything that had a lot of cursing, things of that nature, and just really making sure that we keep the space harmonious, that we create and maintain our harmonious culture. And it's funny because with my 2750, which, well, I'm sure we'll get to that in another point, I also was very much about enforcing the culture that we had created. So yeah, that's how that has shown up for me.
Interesting. Yeah. Veronica, again, you bring both sides to the table. You bring both sides to a group. Are you able to see or notice how you contribute or create culture in groups?
Yeah, I definitely see this. Like, for example, the way I see it come to life, like, okay, in foundations, the way I start, right? The welcoming everyone, giving everybody a chance to say hello, chime in. Then I start with the energy of the day. Then I talk about what we're going to be doing today. Then we get into this, right? We take a break. We go, like, I'm letting them know, like, I'm setting the pace, right? And they're kind of lining up with that pace. I also see the way that I do that. Like, I also teach like a lot of leadership and management programs in business. And a lot of times, some of the more advanced ones that I do are multi-month. So I have the same cohort of people coming together for 6 months, right? And we're doing something. And it's that same type of thing, right? Where I do notice how I will, just have an overall flow to the session. Just the balance of talking about things or doing things and activities, the pattern of homework and coaching or assigning a mentor to them. Like anytime I'm designing a curriculum, I can really see, as we're talking about this, how I infuse a pattern around the curriculum. It's not that I do the same thing for every curriculum, but I do notice how that is exactly where I want to save my mind, but it's really my whole body, right? It's just my way of being, wants to infuse this idea of a pattern around this experience that we're having.
You know what's interesting is I'm hearing you explain this. It's like I had this real clear visual image without you trying to do anything. It's like you step into the room and then suddenly there's this flow of energy and it's moving in a very particular direction. And everyone, whether they know it or not, are jumping on board. It's like they're getting on the boat and they're flowing in this direction. And you're the one sort of shepherding this process. And again, this is happening automatically. It's not something you have to try to do, or it's not some special, unique superpower that you have. Although the way you describe it, it feels superpower-ish to me. Again,
Yeah.
Vanessa and I
Like
just
you
have one
said.
part of that, but you just like whoosh off to
Yeah.
the race.
I was sharing this with both of you earlier. Over time, I have understood the power of it better, especially once I started studying human design. Like, okay, just like, because you learn about what all of these traits are, how they come together to form a strength. And then you go through this whole process of observing yourself in it and then noticing. And every time we end up having discussions like this, right? Of like, well, how do you experience it? What do you notice? Because I can also tell you, like, if someone is not, I think in my business examples in particular, if they're not fitting in with the flow, like they're resisting, they're not doing the work, they're not contributing. I can tell you, it's not that I go out of my way to push them out, but they generally don't make it. They oftentimes just voluntarily will say, you know what, I think this isn't the right thing for me, or it's not the right time for me. I don't have the time to dedicate to this. And I think, again, like I was saying before, right, the whole thing of culture and reliability, this standard that I'm setting, I think it's just, I do think that most people want to kind of, meet the expectation in a sense, might be one way to think of it. I'm not necessarily being, again, like, this is what you must do, but I'm laying out the flow and the expectation in that sense of what you need to do, right? The work that you need to put in along the way. And if you don't feel like you can do it, then it really probably isn't the right thing for you. So why waste your time,
Yeah, that makes sense. So thank you, Veronica, for making the time to join Vanessa and I. Wonderful to have you on board. So illuminating. Before we sign off, let me just give you a couple quick takeaways for people who are new to either BG5 or this concept of skills and pentas. So again, if we're looking at the big picture, we have this zone in the body graph. It's right smack dab in the middle. It goes from energy resource to identity to communication. That center column there, if you have any definition in that zone, you are someone who's designed to fit into a group, especially a small group. And when we're looking at the specific gaits or traits, we translate that from a gait trait as something individual, but when you step into a group, it morphs into something else, which we call a skill. Those skills are what you contribute to the group, and we think in terms of these skills as a business sort of little mini superpower that you have. So that's the beginning of our talk. That's what we want you to take away from today. We're really excited that we had Veronica on. She gave us a really good understanding of this whole 515, whereas Vanessa and I, we get to experience the 15, but we don't have it. So we specialize in that idea of culture, whereas you, Veronica, get to specialize in everything else. So thank you again for making time for us. And anything else we want to add before we sign off?
March 25th, we will be working on our next lower Penta skills and strengths. We look forward to seeing you. It was so good to have you, Veronica. And I always love hearing people's experience with, especially this particular strength, because I'm always like, I don't get it. So it was really, really helpful. So yeah, always good to have you.
Thank you. Great to be here.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Bye for now. We'll see you on the 25th.